Echoes Darkly.
Welcome to Echoes Darkly. I am one of the two hosts, DJ Allen, and I am joined by my friend and co-host,
Sean Kyle Irvin William Steele, Sean Steele for short.
And if those of you that are watching the show live right now, which is our one viewer, you'll see that Sean's subtitle is Pretty Something Sailor.
I am a pretty slasher sailor mind screw.
Yeah, and I am a vampire slayer.
In the name of love and beauty, I will traumatize your childhood.
That's good. It's good. Somebody needs to traumatize my childhood. But,
I don't even know what's... It's just like, again, you had it to me!
But then again, my childhood was a long time ago.
True. So, causality rips. I like it. Time travel.
Yes.
It's topical.
All right. I swear to all the audience, live, not live, everybody, that this will be the last time we will sound like we really don't know what's going on, because I'm going to... Ooh, we have to pause a second.
What?
There's a fire truck going by.
Who cares? It's a fire truck. Yeah. Unless it's pulling up to your house and it's like you have a green fire going on, you're fine.
No. See, we've got... well, the missus can go find out now, but the neighborhood we live in, we're like on the very edge of the bad part of the neighborhood, but we're in the good part.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the fire truck going that direction is exciting. There's the missus.
I can't see it.
Oh, she can't see it. They must be too far down.
Well, hey, at least you're not getting shot at yet.
Yeah.
But if it came down or blocked like that, it doesn't have very far to go.
Yeah. Okay, well, what I wanted to get back to is that I promised that this will be the last time we sound like we don't know what we're doing, because Sean and I have agreed to do a show rundown every week, or not every week, well, every other week, so that we don't sound like we don't know what the hell we're talking about. Because
on top of that, we have a pre-made format for, what, like 14, 18 episodes now? So we've got long.
Yeah, we definitely have something to talk about for those 14 to 18 episodes.
Yeah, so we're going to be covered for a long time. Well over, like, I want to say well over half a year, because that's actually not true, but we've got at least a season. Well over a season, actually, because we do the bi-weekly thing. Yeah.
So we're gonna start from the back. I know that throws you for another loop, but we were talking in the pre-show. We didn't do as many shenanigans in the pre-show, but we're talking in the pre-show, and on our little rundown, I have something about reading. Now,
this is not a reading rainbow thing.
No. What I want to do, and this, I wrote reading so that I would understand what I'm doing. I want to read pieces. I want to relearn all of the World of Darkness. So I'll relearn the Wad book. I'll relearn Vampire. I'll learn Werewolf. So on and so forth. I'll read a chunk, and then I'll go on Google Plus Hangout on air like this, and I will discuss it. And if I can get people involved that want to be on or want to chat with me live or correct something I have wrong, that's where I would get that. So if you want to do the same thing, John, I would encourage that, but you don't have to.
Since you have more experience with the old WAD, I think that'd be appropriate if I did that with the old WAD. You did it with the new WAD.
I like that. Yeah.
But certainly I will critique you on anything that comes up new WAD. I will correct you when you are wrong. I'll chase you down and, beat you. I'll get Dobermans or something like that. I don't know.
I don't have a set schedule for when I want to do this, but just like this is going to go up on limeflavored.com, I'm going to have a set schedule section after this episode, right after this episode, almost immediately. Then I'll set that up in the schedule so that you can start seeing ahead of time on limeflavored.com when and how to watch the show live, basically. So I just wanted to put that out there. So that's the last thing on the rundown. And like I said, I'll be doing all the New World stuff because I'd like to be more involved, especially for what's on our second piece of the agenda, which we're going to hit right away next anyway.
Yep. Because next up is actually the Echoes Darkly podcast game. We've been talking for a few weeks now about running a game between me and DJ Allen. And we're starting to work on a story. And it's looking to be very flexible. It looks like we'll be able to cover a lot of dynamics, both with mirrors, rules, with settings, a lot of this other stuff. But more importantly, we're going to try and hit at what we feel is the heart of each game line. From what I understand, we are going to be starting off with Pure Mortals, but that's not necessarily going to be a limitation. So I think that's as much of a teaser as I'm willing to give right now. Do you have anything more to say there, Podcast God?
I am. Well, I wanted to, not necessarily about the story, but what I wanted to do is I want to personally include being able to play on Twitter and being able to play via Facebook, so that on the weeks that I am running the show, running the game, I can play basically 100% of the time, or once a day at least. And then at the end of the week, or into the 2 weeks, or however long we take to rotate, that everybody can participate doing the Facebook thing in character all the time, and the Twitter thing in character. And I wanted to include that as something new, because I've never done it that way before, never included it that way before, and I think that being able to play all the time is a good idea.
Alright, that sounds a lot braver than anything I would normally do. I hear about people doing the alternative media way of doing gameplay, and it sounds intriguing, but I don't know where I would start. I don't know how I would use it, and quite frankly, like I said, for me it's actually surprisingly scarier than you think it would be for someone my age. But using the social networking and such, it sounds really cool. So we're still in the middle of working this out, figuring out how it's going to all mesh together. But once we have a formula, we should have a good week-long running game with, on the weekends, having the traditional sit down, have a game session. So that said, if you want to get in on this game, let us know at whitewolf.com, either through Lime Flavored, or send a PM to Lime Flavored, who is DJ Allen, or Arcane Watcher, who is me, and we will definitely put you on the roster, and we'll let you know whatever things you need to know for the game in advance. So,
and since we're doing, if we are going to rotate being game masters, which I like that idea greatly, because then I can play once in a while.
That was the entire point of it.
Yeah, we can actually have twice as big as crew, because I can run you plus 3 or 4 others, and then you can do the same, run me and 3 or 4 others. So we're running with 7, 8, 9 extra people, which I think is a great idea.
Yep. So on the whole, that just gives us hopefully this will be a very diverse game. This will give us a chance to to look at all the games, but still have a very strong central point to work off of. So what I'm saying is, we will have a central theme, central story, but at the same time, we should be able to delve a little into all the variations that exist in the world of darkness.
That's partly what actually spawned my wanting to read on air, is to show everybody how far I am and how much I understand.
Yeah. So I don't think we have... Right now, the story is still in production. We're still figuring out where exactly we're going to go. And a large part of that is that once we have a central conceit, I know I at least will want to hear what the individual players will want to do with their characters. So, like I said, still a work in progress, but this is coming. We are finally getting this in motion.
Yes. And the super serious discussion really only started this morning, but we have all week. We have 2 weeks now before you hear the next update, so we're coming along.
Yeah. It's finally getting out. It's finally moving out of a pipe dream, is what we're saying.
Yes.
All right. So I think we've been... Oh, one more.
No, well, I was going to move on to the next item.
Yeah, I was about to say, we're beating this into a dead horse.
Yeah. Well, and we're gonna save the thematic conversation for for the last thing. So the only other thing
Okay.
on the list other than that is I had a weird idea today.
Oh dear.
So I thought, okay, when I look at, for instance, Promethean, I personally don't have any interest in Promethean, but maybe that's because I don't understand how Promethean works. So my theory was if I get someone, or if I'm involved in the game, or I just broadcast someone else's actual play, if someone will give a one-shot game, like an SAS, I'm right now I'm finding out whether or not it's legal to use the SAS and run the audio broadcast, basically. But run a one-shot of each splat, including the World of Darkness, to run it as it should be played. So Vampire, you won't get the combat heavy game because that's not how it was intended to be played. Mage, you won't get the extremely social game because that's not how it was intended to be played. Stuff like
Well,
that.
it can be played that way, but
Well, I mean the way it was intended and the normal theme of the book, and I'm just
yeah.
using vague statistics, but I've got one guy that's willing to run the changeling once I organize how all this is going to work, and then I think I might have a
You got
hunter
someone
guy.
aside from me? Who did you get?
The what?
Who did you get?
It's a friend. He joined the new version of Dark Green before I put the kibosh on Dark Green, but I know he likes Changeling. And then I
Alright.
have another friend who really likes Hunter, and he hasn't gotten back to me yet. But if he's willing to do the one shot, I bet he can get his own crew going, and then we can get that involved too. The only other thing I wanted to mention was I asked the Knights of the Nights guys, the KOTN guys, to actually do this. I mean, run a few of the one shots of the different splats. Um,
Look at you making connections.
well, Tom, the guy that runs he does all the audio editing. He's the only one I have on. I'm connected with on Facebook. He said he would run it by Scott, who's the guy that does the World of Darkness stuff, but he doesn't think that group will do it because of they like the long form narrative, which I understand. But I figured I'd give him a shot anyway, and I wanted to give him a shout out because, well, I mean, they're the best actual play that I've heard online so far, even though I got a few downloaded today.
Alright.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this. All I can really say is, as far as Promethean goes, that is you need the right sort of group to play that game. It's probably the most mature of the World of Darkness game lines out there. Changeling may or not be on par with it, but Promethean is definitely. It is a very particular story. It's a story with a goal. So, I didn't know about this. This is going to be interesting to see. I don't know if I'll be participating in that personally or not, given the way the rest of my schedule works. But, that said, school?
And everybody I've been asking, it's an audio format. If they want to do video, great, but it just has to be an audio format. And since it's a one shot, if it lasts longer than 6 hours, I would be shocked. So I'm looking for a 2 or 3 or 4 hour one shot game that basically gets the feel, the mood, and runs the rules the way they're supposed to be. So give somebody who's never played that particular splat a good feel on how that would play, and I would put that out on the Echoes Darkly feed, so that we would have this all on record, basically, for other people to check out.
Alright. So, I don't really have much to say about that. That's, once again, more of your project.
Yeah, well,
But-
like I said, it popped into my head today, and I was like, well, that's the smartest thing I could have, I should have been thinking about this a long time ago, but, well, now that I've put it out there, we'll see if anybody wants to jump in, and I don't need any, I mean, if you've got a one-shot on audio of something, get a hold of me. If you're watching this, you can get a hold of me on the YouTube channel. It's mine. If you're watching this on Google Plus, this should be. I'm the main host right now, so you can get a hold of me that way. You can also get me on limeflavored.com. And I wanted to make a correction. Last episode, or the episode with Morgan on it, because She gave out Trump's hair for president at gmail.com as the email address.
Oh dear.
No, I completely forgot. I have echoesdarkly at gmail.com, so you can get us a hold of us at that.
And it's a heck of a lot more direct.
Yeah, and I didn't think about it till she left that night. I'm like, wait, I have that email address, so it's ours. So we
All right.
can hold us that way. But we're gonna move in
Good catch.
to the. In the name of the moon, I traumatize you. All right, we're gonna get on to the main thing here, which is, oh, I wrote the same thing down twice. It's how to play. Well, and this goes along with the Splat thing. How to play Vampire thematically, as it was thematically intended.
All right. So, have you been reading both vampires actually, to start getting your own ideas?
It's I guess, as far as New World of Darkness goes, it's the only Splat other than the Mortals that I know. So Vampire the Requiem I'm great with, and I have the most experience in Masquerade, even though I know Werewolf fairly well. So I mean, Vampire's the one that I know the best.
All right. So, given that this is much more your bag than it is mine, I can certainly gabber on about this. But I'm actually very interested in where thematically to begin with Vampire from your point of view.
I have been unfortunate enough to, as I've stated on the podcast before, unfortunate enough to be stuck with groups that want to do a lot of combat. Vampire, while combat can be accommodated, is actually a political/social game. And I would really like to be able to play a political/social game because, as I'm sure that you have participated in, combat is highly different than basically every other form of play.
It's slower for starters, and for second, it's combat for combat's sake really is an amazingly boring thing.
It's not for the ones who that's all they want is combat. But I mean, yeah, to me, if you're in your third firefight in the first hour of gameplay, I'm gonna need something to drink because you're gonna have to keep me entertained.
Yeah. I think it was Jim Butcher, writer of the Dresden Files, who said, you have a conflict when both people have something to lose and can't afford to. And that's something that a lot of people miss when they go into Vampire. I'm going to have my what Vampire is not tirade right now, if that's okay.
That's great. Now that way we establish the opposition, I guess.
Yeah. So, for the purpose of this little tirade, I'm going to need to at least explain that this is something that a lot of people see Vampire doing from the outside of the game. A lot of people who actually do get into it don't see it here. But once we understand this outside thing, it helps us understand it much better from the inside. So, Vampire is a game about tragic monsters. And when people look at it from the outside, they tend to focus in on one word or the other. The two commonalities you hear about Vampire is that either it's an emo, angsty game, or it's a game where you're an absolute monster and basically get away with doing horrible, horrible things. And that really, really misses the point of Vampire as far as it goes. Yes, you, in regards to the Trump, and in regards for the... I just lost my word. Something about monsters. Okay, I'll fixate on the monsters one. Okay, people who fixate on the monsters one, who fixate on the idea of you can go around, you can shoot everyone you want, you can get away with thieving. It kind of surprised me how many people think that World of Darkness in general is a game that encourages that is a viable option for raping people. And it's like, no, it's not. It misses the point because vampires used to be human, and it's something they cling on to. Is it something they lose? Yes, by God, yes. Do you lose your humanity as a vampire? But it's not something that you just lose as soon as you get turned into one. It's something you claw at. It is something you struggle to keep a hold of. You do not just instantly become this blood-sucking in Bastard, you try and maintain yourself as best as you can. It's a losing fight, which is where the drama comes in, which which kind of flips me around to the angsty idea. Vampire is not a game where you sit on your ass and just mourn your fate. It's not where you're constantly crying over it. The reality of Vampire is that this is a game about people trying to go on with their life while it's crumbling away very slowly. I think that's the best, one of the best ways to do it. I think I've used a similar metaphor several times before. Because, quite frankly, yeah, there's the political, there's the social aspect, but in regards for personal horror, it is the fact of you now have these set of circumstances on you. You can't go out in daytime, you have to drink blood, you have to do all that, and all of this is going to wear and tear at you. Given enough time, you're going to lose who you are. And Vampire is very much a game of choosing what you will have at the end of eternity, and how long you're going to fight to keep these things, and what for. And that influences both the personal game and the political game. So, you have anything to say? Because I can continue on, but I feel like this is a good segue moment.
Well, okay. Going at the personal horror thing, I've never had the opportunity to play Vampire as personal horror. Listening to one of the pre-show conversations from the KOTN guys, they all had the assumption that vampires were like intrinsically evil and they couldn't do anything that they didn't want to do anything that had to do with evil things. So vampires were the bad guys. And I've also recently heard Fear the Boot discuss. They seem to think that playing the evil type character was out of the ordinary. Now, both of these scenarios where these two groups of separate people in separate parts of the country are discussing only being good made me realize that I either know a lot of sadistic evil people, or I'm doing something wrong, because I've not been in a game to where, like I said, I can't play the personal horror aspect, which I want to play, and I've only played the games where there's maybe a slight leveling off of the character, and then boom, it's right into monstrosity. So it's really that's where the combat comes in. Is the combat people really drag it down into, well, I don't care, there's no consequences, I'm a vampire superhero, woo!
Yeah, and those are the people who really just don't get it, and really aren't looking for more than that. I guess when you get right down to it, there's nothing wrong with it. It's your game. If it's fun for you, have fun. But Vampire is a fairly surprisingly intimate game when you think about it. Because like I said, we talk about it being a social political game. And it really is. Their signature antagonists are themselves. It's not like where you go with Werewolf the Forsaken, where it might be the spirits or it might be the pure, or with Changeling, where it's your fetch or the true fae. With Vampire, the social political aspect is very much your main antagonist is going to be the other vampires in your city who aren't necessarily a black organization. You know, you could be in the same church, the Lancea Sanctum, and you're going to have conflict in there. And it's because Vampire is... because of the way Vampire works, it is very personal. It is a very down to the heart game, because it does ask some very critical questions of what will you become, what would you do in a situation like that, and it's a game where basically you will lose, but you get to decide how you lose.
And I've never been involved in a game where anybody's even remotely taken that chance. In my very first Storyteller, we kind of started out that way, but when the guy that got there that we kind of needed as a third party that only wanted combat got in, that the whole personal horror thing went right out the window.
Yeah. Now, I've been dragging on a lot about how there's this sort of personal tragedy to it, and vampire is a tragedy. But for those of you who can't read my subtitle right now, it basically says Sean Steele is the vampire who eats beer broths. And I want to make it clear, this is just as much a part of vampire. Vampire is not solely dark and depressing. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of things that suck about being vampire, but on the other hand, there's a lot of opportunities that are opened up. Particularly in this day and age, as far as vampires go. First of all, there's just a simple allure of power. You have more options than the other people do. You can get things you couldn't get as a normal person. And what's more is that unlike, let's say, a normal human who gets brought into the supernatural, because of that power, you don't feel as threatened. You have new opportunities. You can... This is not a game where I'd say you get a chance to go and fix things up with a girl or something like that, but you can get very far ahead in the world. You can get money. You can get a limited amount of fame. You can get a lot of different things. It's a game you can enjoy. Part of the allure of Vampire is the fact that it is a... I remember a thread conversation where I said one of the biggest advantages of vampires that they have, even over mages, is that vampires will always find a way to be needed. And that, I think, actually comes into the very cool factor of vampire. Again, also social-political, namely social, but you can make... you will always find a way to get what you want because other people will need you, despite the fact of what you are. So...
And that's something that I don't ever get to see played either, is that every time I'm involved in a game with vampires, they should be manipulating the mortals around them that are in power, but all the players want to do is wipe out anyone that's in their way without utilizing the mortal aspect. And the thing that's the same between Masquerade and Requiem, I think, is that you're doing a solitary thing, but you're trying to do it in a social setting, and I liked that aspect of it. But I've never gotten I've been so left out. Nobody likes me.
Well, let me make it clear. I haven't gotten to play Vampire this way either, but that doesn't stop it from this being the way that Vampire is supposed to be run, and it being very cool for it. I'm going to cite a real-world example. I've recently had a huge fight with a former friend of mine. And, you know what? If I were a vampire, I could really resolve my issue with him very quickly, very simply. And I'd be able to get out my spite as well. And you know what? It's very tempting. I think as a game story, that would actually be something very rewarding to see. It could be really fun to see just how you do play with people. And there's that moral and ethical question of how far do you go before you let someone go. And that's where the morality tale of Vampire comes in. And that entire tragic monster, there's the word I was looking for, tragic monster thing comes in. Because you have these opportunities, once again, it's very easy to abuse. And it's very easy to cross the line. And vampires are very much more about that. Nowhere near as far as mage. Mage is very much the predominant what you decide to do has consequences one. Whereas vampire is very much no matter what you do, you have a consequence, so you just need to choose carefully. But my point about
keep going.
Well, I'm hitting on that tragic monster thing very hard, and it really does come down to this is what Vampire is about. Is a game about tragic monsters, both words put together. But that said, can you have a white knight who's a vampire? Yes. Can you have a vampire who eats beer brats? Clearly. Games are supposed to be fun just as much as they invite you to offer an opportunity to explore and cover deeper themes and deeper ideas. So, as a story, what Vampire is thematically about is really that choice of what are you going to lose, when and why, and what will you hold on to. But it's worth noting that this is a fun game. This is a game where you can go around and do some really just fun and silly stuff. I want to say silly in the sense of it's nonsensical, but it comes back to that question: what would you do as a vampire? And I think everyone who's gets past the point of, well, I'd kill myself or anything like that. Once they get past that point, they've openly admit, yeah, there's a lot of things you could do as a vampire.
The thing that probably lends itself to people going off the rails is that everybody looks at the clans, for instance, and they see, ooh, the Maquette have the shadowy powers, and the Gangrel, they can grow their claws real long. So that's what I want, is I want my claws to grow real long in combat. Rather than a game master or storyteller looking at the type of character that they've made and saying, well, you may want your claws and you'll be able to see in the dark protean power, but you fit more with the Nosferatu, and they're hiding and moving fast and stuff like that. So you really should have a Nosferatu vampire, and then the player either throws a hissy fit and doesn't want to, or they decide to throw out the personal horror part, which
Yeah.
my first game master, he looked at our characters and he chose what our clan was. I hated it at the time, but I appreciate it now because I realized that I was playing a Ventru in that first game. I started playing an Assamite style character in later games. I was a Brujah from the way I acted with that character. I mean, he pegged us pretty good. There was one miss-up that he had. He made me a Nosferatu in one thing, and I should have really been La Sombra, because I actually designed the character to be La Sombra 100%. And he looked at it, he didn't want to use La Sombra was the thing. And that's
So that was that was very much a DM error.
But other than that, he pegged it pretty good, and I've tried my hand at it. I'm not nearly as good at designating the clans with the personality traits, but I'd really like to be in a group, which is why we announced our game the way we did, is I want to be in a group that wants to character develop, and combat is a secondary thing. If it happens, it happens, but...
Combat is the result of other things that happen. It is when the stakes are raised to a point where it can't be resolved any other way. It's not just something thrown out.
And that's the way it should be, is that it's a last resort, or you've pre-planned it out perfectly, because that's the only way to get rid of your rival.
Yeah. So, yeah, so how do you play a game of vampire thematically, running with this idea of vampires are tragic monsters?
I think that, well, there's the... what book is it in? There's a book, a vampire, a splat book that has alternate rules in it, and there's three...
The Dance Macabre.
Yes, the three different levels: the street level, the mid level, and then the elder level.
Yeah,
you should embrace the character right off the bat and leave them at the street level until you figure out what type of character they're playing. So they should never run into the prince, ever. They should only run into people on their level or people doing devious things at that level. And then when you see that they start wanting to branch out, they don't want to be at the street level anymore, then you can start getting them more deep into the politics. So basically advance people. I've never been in a game where I didn't meet the prince in the first hour of gameplay.
Well, part of that is that the game books themselves say that the prince wants to meet newly embraced vampires as quickly as possible. And you know what? That's fine. But I actually like the idea of you start people off at street level, because then you get to find out what their real desire is. Once when you get them involved with the covenants, or with the... Gosh, I don't know what they're called in Masquerade right now, but with the Kamria or Sabat in Masquerade.
Sex.
Sex, yes. when you get them involved with the Covenant Sword of Sex, they get very focused on these much bigger pictures. And that misses the point that vampire is socio-political, but it's socio-political because it comes from that personal aspect. From what it is they want to do now that they're beginning to lose everything. What exactly are they I'm going to stress that again and again. This is very much a game of you're losing stuff. What are you going to try and hold on to? Because it really does. When you look at the prince of any city, when you look at the bishops, the priests, when you look at the acolytes, the Carthians, when you look at anyone in there, it ultimately does come down from that. This is your version of eternity. No, you're not going to be able to hold on to everything. People may not realize that innately, and that's fine, because that will determine just as much. But it really does influence every aspect of it. I mean, we often hear about, okay, the prince, the big head vampire, is an a-hole. Why is he an a-hole?
I'll tell you why he's an a-hole. He's an a-hole because he's got way too much shit to do. And he's got too many people pestering him with brand new vampires that he either A or B didn't, either A let happen or B didn't let happen, and now he's got to figure out what to deal with it. And there's 75 people that want to talk to him in a night. He's got no secretaries. He's annoyed, goddammit. He's pissed off.
Well, yeah, handling the affairs of all the vampires in one city, even if you do have the division of power and other people are dealing with certain things, is going to drive you nuts. But there's going to be a reason he takes certain points and politics that he does. And I bet you it all comes back to the time when he was first embraced and what he did during the first few months, as he couldn't spend time with his family, or maybe not as part of his family that I would normally spend with, or with friends, or with coworkers. Once he starts finding out what to do, once all that has been yanked out, that's going to inform who and what he is, even all the way up to being a prince.
And that's the way it should be. You should start. You should figure out, as a storyteller, figure out what the player is, and then start working him into the bigger picture. Because, like I just said, the prince is busy enough. They've got enough to do. They're not going to piddle around with every single little brand new vampire that happens to pop in. So
it might be more realistic for people in game to start off with maybe meeting the Primogen, particularly if the Primogen is also, I'm trying to remember the right word. I apologize if I get it wrong. The Priscus, basically the clan, the oldest of the clan in the area, because I could see the oldest clan member wanting to meet all the new family members, wanting to know what they have at their disposal.
I could go with that too. Or if we want to keep that lower levelness, whoever's in charge of that particular domain. So if however they have it deviated up, the sub-level boss down there in the, he's only a couple steps above you when you're embraced.
Well, I had a vampire game planned once, and one thing I actually liked about that is the sire, the principal sire. There were a couple of sires, obviously, because you can't count on everyone being in the same clan. But the principal one for them was actually exiled. So he's not going to bring them forward because he doesn't want to get in deeper crap. He's got his own plans going on with this. So, again, this is all just running by if you run with the recommendation notebook, which is where you do get formally introduced, which doesn't always happen. I mean, could you imagine what American government would be like if every immigrant had to go meet the president?
There's a perfect example. Now, granted, there's less vampires in a city, but if you're running in New York, for instance, the prince is responsible for 500 vampires. I mean, that's an obnoxious amount.
With how many people are in New York? Like, what's New York's population?
It's like 30 million. I mean, it's like a tenth of the country.
Yeah, it's phenomenally huge. And you figure even if you run with that one vampire to 50,000 ratio, that's still a phenomenally huge number. So yeah, in New York, definitely, and it's not just New York, but that kind of serves the point of it. You just can't imagine they're even going to care. It If they're going to go that far, they're at least going to break it down to other people beneath him. You know, these are the rules. Here's the Elysium. Don't do anything to piss people off. Otherwise, we will burn you.
And I've been now, granted not of a large group, but I've been a manager in any position of managerial power, and I can tell you that I didn't have time for every single piddly little request all the time. Not that they weren't important, but some of them could be handled by other people. So that's what I let happen because it needed to be delegated to somebody else.
Oh,
But
that's actually mildly disappointing.
and knowing, no,
I found out how many vampires would be in New York according to White Wolf's numbers. But go on.
Many? Oh well, okay. Having been in,
165 to get that out.
how many?
165.
That's it?
That's it. I might have to go reread the book, but that's it. It's like,
Now that's using the 1 to 50,000 ratio.
yeah.
I use a 1 to 10,000 ratio, personally.
Okay. I'll let you.
Okay, well I'll keep going.
Get back to your rant. I'll calculate that out because hell.
Up until
I'm still listening, by the way.
Yeah, up until about 7 years ago, I constantly strove to be in a managerial position because I like desk work. But having been in that managerial position now and doing what I'm doing where I'm doing it at, which is the post office, I know that I don't want to be a manager anymore. So there's got to be a vampire, a primogen, a prisus, a whip, somebody up in the hierarchy that's doing it because they can't get out of it. So, of course, they're not going to want to talk to Joe Schmuckatelli, who just got embraced into the Nosferatu clan and may not make the night, much less the week. So, it's possible. What do we got?
But that way it's much better. It's 824. So we've kind of gone far afield from the thematics of vampire. One thing I do want to bring up though is we brought up this is not going strictly to be New World of Darkness, but I feel like both vampires are close enough in theme that the only real difference between them as far as thematics go is Requiem is much more about becoming the monster. It's again that story of progress. Masquerade does emphasize more. You're already the monster. What do you do as a monster? I mean, which put that way, it makes it sound like, okay, you're a vampire. What do you do now? I read the newspaper.
I agree that Masquerade was more so the let's throw you into the deep end and just go ahead, whereas Requiem, they want you to character develop. I would also say that the other...
Well, they're both character developments, but they're asking very different questions. One asks how you become it, and one asks what you're doing once you're there.
Yeah, and the other big difference is Masquerade's global outlook really takes the focus away from the city, whereas Requiem, if you look outside the city, you've got way too much going on. You've got too much going on inside the city to worry about the outside, so it can be a more personal game. It's designed to be that way.
Yeah. That's one thing you're going to hear a lot about any of the World of Darkness games. Even the old Worlds of Darkness ones for me. It does come back down to, this is a personal game. Enjoying that, are you?
Yeah, yeah, I am.
Anyways, the entire World of Darkness is very much a personal horror game. And while you don't always have to emphasize that horror aspect, that doesn't stop the fact that this is still a personal game. This game works at its best when you start from the fact that you have characters. So as a thing to players, good players already do this. I have arguments with certain other players who don't. Come in with a conflict in mind. Come in with an idea of what is a character's problem and what exactly do you have in mind to resolve it. GMs will love you for it, And quite frankly, the story will be far more engaging working on a conflict of your own design than of your own bringing, actually, instead of design. The design should be the GM's, but it will always be much more interesting than any sort of combat scenario the GM could throw at you.
And for the love of God, will you people stop killing off every single relative of your character so we can get your background involved in it?
I know, right? I know.
I don't know how many players. How likely is it that the 6 people in the entire city that have absolutely no relatives, the last one just died of cancer or a biker gang or something, they all just get together and hang out? That's not likely. Okay, it's leaving somebody alive.
Last of the Family Club meets Thursdays at the Jazz Bar.
It's ridiculous.
You might as well just sing. If you're going to go that route, you might as well just say that your character's favorite movie is The Dead Poets Society, and God, I don't even know where to go from there.
It's not pretty, is what it is.
Yeah. Once again, this is a personal game. It is, and part of for Requiem in particular, it is very important that we see how you get there. Again, you can't exactly just hang around family and friends. We get that. But that doesn't stop the fact that you're gonna want to. I mean, again, ask yourself a question. World of Darkness really works on this principle of ask yourself, what would you do if you were here instead of what would a character do? If you got turned into a vampire, would you necessarily leave? Would you explain it to him? And regardless of what you do, how would your family react? And that's the way your characters should go. If you have a good family life, they're going to come check on you. And a lot of people kill their families to avoid that because they're afraid of it being exploited. And it's like, but then there's no story. There's no point to you.
I hate to use this as an example, but because we're watching it, and I'm going to admit this here on air, The Vampire Diaries is a good thing to watch for why not complications that can be interesting if your family discovers you're a vampire.
Yeah. And it's worth noting that having those sort of background details of family, friends, coworkers, all this sort of jazz, doesn't always have to end in tragedy. It really doesn't. Even though this is a game about tragic monsters, it doesn't have to end in tragedy. Or more accurately, it doesn't have to end sadly. I think people get that confused with tragedy. They always think it has to have a sad ending. Tragedy doesn't have to have a sad ending, which is counterintuitive to what we immediately think of, but that's the way the genre works. So, yes, we want these things so that we can tell a story that matters, that feels much more real and important to us than just my entire family died off, and now I am angry, and I am a Lancea Sanctum Crusader, blarg.
Right.
Yeah.
But
having that sort of background means that, and no, we shouldn't, GMs out there who overly exploit that, you shouldn't. But when it does get exploited, it matters. It means something. You get much more emotionally invested in the game, and that's how you know you have a good game. When you have people who are getting scared, who are getting angry, who are getting frustrated, who, when you have a combat in this sort of situation, walk up from the table and limp away. I've had that happen. I'm very proud that I've had that happen. That's when you've all had a good game, because you get emotionally invested. You care about the characters. It's just the same as it is with movies or books.
Okay. Well, I was going to try to segue from your talk of the end to be the end. But rather than just end and complete, well, we're repeating the same things. So
yeah, we're at that point now.
We've
actually turned into ranting.
What thematic book or line do we want to go with next? I don't want to go just in order, so if you really want to do Werewolf next, we can, but I think that we should skip around.
No, I don't think we should. And my opinions on this game have changed. I don't know if you have it or not. But I originally thought that when I picked up this particular game line, I still had my disdain for vampire, and I looked at it and I said, "This is the way vampire should have been." So, as the next game to go over, may I recommend Geist the Sin Eaters?
Ooh, I like that because I being a big Wraith fan, have high hopes for Geist.
Oh, you'll love Geist. It's nothing like Wraith. We've had this discussion before. It's nothing like Wraith, but you will love Geist all the same.
I hope
so.
So we'll
Yeah.
discuss the thematic things as the main topic next time on Wraith. So, looking at our magic calendar, that would
Which
put
is off
us...
screen.
Yeah, it's actually within reach, too. That would put us at October 6th.
That can't be right.
No? Yeah, today's the September 22nd. Then October 6th will be the next... That's 2 weeks from now.
I want to say Great Scott, but I can't pull off the Doc Brown impression. But yeah, so going from the first of the New World line to the most recent released game line from, look forward to Geist. Ladies and gentlemen, my second favorite game.
Now, at the beginning of the episode, you were confused as to why we have a video for 3 and a video now for 5, but we don't have a 4.
Yeah, you're doing stuff behind my back, you know. You're cheating on me. You're sleeping with another panda bear.
I felt that I wanted to get out that episode that I talked about with vampire employment, and that it's in the audio feed, so that's episode 4 if you guys want to go listen to it. There won't be an in-between episode unless Sean wants to put something out specifically, but it's about things vampires can do for employment that don't involve just ghouling somebody and living off of them.
Yeah.
All right. It's officially too late.
It's officially too late. Alright. So, we've ranted on long enough. I'm Sean Kyle over and William Steele, echoing out.
And this is DJ Allen, echoing out.
Wow.